Marcus Wellington stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below like scattered diamonds. At 38 years old, he had everything a man could want. His technology company had made him one of the youngest billionaires in America. He owned properties across 3 continents. Magazine covers featured his face regularly. Yet something hollow lived inside his chest, an emptiness that no amount of money could fill. 5 years had passed since his divorce from Amara Johnson, and not a single day went by without her crossing his mind. She had been the love of his life, a beautiful black woman with skin the color of rich cocoa and eyes that held entire universes within them. They had met at a charity event in Chicago when Marcus was still building his empire. She was a pediatric nurse, kind and gentle, with a laugh that could light up the darkest room. Their love story had been the stuff of fairy tales. Marcus, the ambitious white businessman from old money, had fallen completely and helplessly in love with Amara, a woman who came from humble beginnings in the south side of Chicago. His family had disapproved strongly. His mother, Victoria Wellington, had made her feelings clear from the very beginning. She believed Amara was beneath their social standing. She whispered poison into Marcus's ear at every opportunity, suggesting that Amara was only interested in his money. But Marcus had defied everyone. He married Amara in a small ceremony on a beach in Hawaii with only close friends present. For 3 years, they had been happy. Amara had supported his dreams while he worked 18-hour days building his company. She never complained about his absence. She never demanded expensive gifts or fancy vacations. All she wanted was his love and his time, 2 things that Marcus increasingly failed to give her. The problem started when his company went public. Suddenly, Marcus was everywhere. Business meetings in Tokyo, conferences in London, negotiations in Dubai. He was home perhaps 1 week out of every month. Amara waited patiently at first. But loneliness is a terrible companion. She began to feel invisible in her own marriage. Then came the lies. Not from Amara, but from people around Marcus. His assistant, a woman named Claire who had always resented Amara, began planting seeds of doubt. She showed Marcus photographs of Amara having lunch with a male colleague. She twisted innocent conversations into evidence of betrayal. Marcus, exhausted and stressed from work, began to listen. His mother added fuel to the fire, suggesting that Amara had never truly loved him. The final breaking point came on their 3rd anniversary. Marcus had promised to be home. He had sworn on everything he held dear that he would be there. Amara had prepared a special dinner. She had news to share with him, news that would change everything. But Marcus never came. A business emergency in Singapore had pulled him away, and he had left without even calling to explain. When he finally returned 2 weeks later, he found the apartment empty. Amara had packed her things and left. On the kitchen counter sat a single envelope. Inside was a letter, written in her beautiful handwriting, explaining that she could no longer live as a ghost in her own marriage. She asked for a divorce. Marcus had been too proud and too stubborn to fight for her. His mother convinced him that letting Amara go was the best decision. Claire whispered that he deserved someone better, someone from his own world. So Marcus signed the divorce papers without even trying to contact Amara. He gave her a generous settlement, enough money to start a new life, and told himself it was for the best. But it was not for the best. In the 5 years since, Marcus had dated supermodels and actresses. He had attended glamorous parties with beautiful women on his arm, yet none of them made him feel the way Amara had. None of them looked at him with genuine love. They saw his bank account, his fame, his power. Amara had seen only him, the man beneath the suits and the success. Now, standing in his penthouse, Marcus felt more alone than ever. His doctor had recently warned him about his stress levels. His therapist suggested he take a break from work. So Marcus had made a decision. He would escape to his farm in rural Tennessee, a property he had purchased years ago but rarely visited. The Wellington Farm, as it was called, covered 500 acres of beautiful countryside. It had horses and cattle and fresh air. Perhaps there he could find some peace. The next morning, Marcus boarded his private jet and flew south. A driver met him at the small regional airport and took him through winding country roads toward the farm. As they drove, Marcus noticed how different this world was from Manhattan. There were no skyscrapers here, no honking taxis, no crowds of people rushing to important meetings. Instead, there were rolling green hills, white wooden fences, and trees that seemed to touch the sky. The Wellington Farm appeared around a bend in the road, and Marcus felt his breath catch. The main house was a beautiful colonial-style mansion, painted white with black shutters. Behind it spread acres of pasture land where horses grazed peacefully. To the side sat a large red barn and several smaller buildings. It was exactly what Marcus needed, a place where he could forget about quarterly reports and shareholder meetings. His farm manager, a friendly older man named Thomas, greeted him at the door. Thomas had run the farm for the past 8 years, handling everything while Marcus focused on his business empire. They shook hands warmly, and Thomas showed Marcus around the property, explaining the recent improvements and introducing him to the staff. That evening, Marcus sat on the wraparound porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in months, he felt his shoulders begin to relax. The silence here was not empty but full of cricket songs and distant horse whinnies and wind rustling through the trees. He decided then that he would stay for at least a month, maybe longer. The next morning, Marcus woke early and decided to explore the far corners of his property. Thomas had mentioned that they had recently hired a new family to manage the eastern section of the farm, where an old cottage had been renovated. Marcus wanted to meet these new employees and see how they were settling in. He saddled one of the horses, a gentle mare named Starlight, and rode across the dewy fields. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. Marcus felt truly alive for the first time in years. Perhaps his therapist had been right. Perhaps he had needed this escape more than he realized. After about 30 minutes of riding, the cottage came into view. It was a charming little house, recently painted yellow with white trim. A small vegetable garden grew beside it, and colorful flowers lined the walkway. Laundry hung on a line in the backyard, fluttering gently in the morning breeze. As Marcus approached, he heard something that made him pull his horse to a stop. Children's laughter. The sound was bright and pure, floating across the field like music. He guided Starlight closer and saw them, 3 children playing in the front yard. They appeared to be about 4 years old, running and chasing each other around a large oak tree. Marcus dismounted and tied his horse to the fence. He began walking toward the cottage, intending to introduce himself to the family. The children noticed him first. They stopped playing and stared at him with wide, curious eyes. Marcus stared back, and suddenly his heart began to pound against his ribs. The children were beautiful. 2 boys and a girl. They had caramel-colored skin and curly hair, but it was their eyes that stopped Marcus cold. They had his eyes. The exact same shade of gray-green that stared back at him from the mirror every morning. The exact same shape, slightly almond-shaped with thick lashes. Before Marcus could process what he was seeing, the front door of the cottage opened. A woman stepped onto the porch, and Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Amara, his ex-wife. Standing on the porch of a cottage on his own farm, watching him with an expression of pure shock. She had changed in the 5 years since he had last seen her. Her hair was longer, worn in natural curls that cascaded past her shoulders. She had grown more beautiful, if that was even possible. But there was something in her eyes now, a strength and a wariness that had not been there before. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The children had stopped their playing and now stood between them, looking from the strange man to their mother with confusion on their little faces. Marcus felt like he might be dreaming. This could not be real. Amara could not be here, on his farm, with children who looked exactly like him. Finally, Amara found her voice. It came out barely above a whisper. Trembling with emotion she could not hide. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" The question seemed almost absurd. This was his farm. He owned every acre of it. Yet standing here, facing the woman he had never stopped loving, facing children who could only be his, Marcus felt like the intruder. "I own this farm," he managed to say. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, thick and unsteady. "Amara, what is going on? Who are these children?" Amara's face went through several emotions: fear, anger, resignation, and finally something that looked like exhaustion. She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold herself together. The children, sensing the tension, ran to their mother and clung to her legs. The little girl peered up at Marcus with those familiar eyes, and he felt something crack open inside his chest. "I think you should leave," Amara said quietly. "Leave?" Marcus could not believe what he was hearing. "Those children have my eyes. They look just like my baby pictures. Please tell me what is happening." Amara closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, tears were gathering. She bent down and whispered something to the children. They nodded and ran inside the cottage, casting curious glances over their shoulders at the tall stranger who had appeared in their yard. Once they were alone, Amara walked down the porch steps and stood a few feet away from Marcus. The morning sun illuminated her face, and Marcus could see the tracks where tears had begun to fall. "Their names are Isaiah, Elijah, and Grace," she said softly. "They turned 4 years old 3 months ago. They are your children, Marcus. Our children." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He actually staggered backward, his hand reaching out to grip the fence for support. His children. He had children, 3 of them, and he had not known they existed. "How is this possible?" he asked. "Why did you not tell me?" "I had a right to know." Amara's expression hardened slightly. "A right? You want to talk about rights? You were never home. You never answered my calls. When I tried to tell you I was pregnant, you were in Singapore and could not be bothered to speak to your own wife. The anniversary dinner, the night Marcus had failed to come home, the news she had wanted to share. Oh God," he breathed. "That night. You were going to tell me that night." Amara nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I had just found out. The doctor told me it was triplets. I was so excited and so scared. I had everything planned. I cooked your favorite meal. I bought little baby booties to surprise you, and you never came." Marcus felt sick. The weight of what he had done, what he had missed, pressed down on him like a mountain. "I tried to reach you after that," Amara continued. "I called and called. Your assistant kept saying you were too busy. Your mother told me to stop bothering you, that you had already moved on. When the divorce papers came, I decided that if you did not want me, you did not want our children either." "That is not fair," Marcus protested, though even he could hear how weak the argument sounded. "I would have wanted to know. I would have been there. Would you?" Amara looked at him with those eyes that had always seen through his defenses. "You could not be there for me. You let your mother and your assistant convince you that I was not good enough. You let me walk away without fighting for me even once. Why would I believe you would fight for our children?" Marcus had no answer. Because she was right. He had let her go. He had believed the lies. He had chosen his business over his marriage. And now he was standing in front of 3 little people who had grown up without knowing their father. "How did you end up here?" he asked finally. "On my farm, of all places." Amara let out a small, bitter laugh. "I had no idea this was your farm." When I answered the job advertisement for a farm manager assistant position, it only said it was the Wellington farm. Wellington is not an uncommon name. I never imagined it belonged to you. I needed work. I needed a safe place to raise my children. The previous manager hired me without mentioning who owned the property. Thomas had hired her. Kind, loyal Thomas, who had no idea about Marcus's personal history. It was a cruel twist of fate, or perhaps something more. "I want to know them," Marcus said suddenly. His voice was firm now, filled with a determination he had not felt in years. "They are my children. I have missed 4 years of their lives. I am not going to miss any more." Amara's eyes flashed with protective anger. "You cannot just walk in and decide to be a father when it is convenient for you. They do not even know you exist. I have told them their father is far away. They have never asked questions. They have a good life here. I will not let you disrupt that." "I am not asking for permission," Marcus said, and immediately regretted his tone. He took a breath and tried again. "Please, Amara, I know I failed you. I know I failed them. But I am here now. Give me a chance to make things right." For a long moment, Amara studied him. The man standing before her looked different from the one she had married. There were more lines around his eyes, more gray in his hair. But there was something else, too, a sadness and a longing that matched her own. Before she could respond, the cottage door creaked open. 3 small faces peered out, curiosity overcoming their caution. "Mama," the little girl called out. "Who is that man? Why does he look at us like that?" Amara glanced at Marcus, then back at her children. Her children. The ones she had raised alone through sleepless nights and illness, and all the challenges that came with being a single mother. The ones she had protected and loved with every fiber of her being. "Come inside, babies," she called softly. "Mama will be there in a minute." The door closed, but Marcus had seen enough. Those 3 faces had burned themselves into his memory, his children, his flesh and blood, growing up without knowing who he was. "I will not leave," he said quietly. "I will be here every day. I will prove to you and to them that I can be the father they deserve, however long it takes." Amara looked at him for another long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back into the cottage, closing the door behind her. Marcus stood alone in the morning sunshine. His whole world turned upside down. Just yesterday, he had been a lonely billionaire seeking peace. Now he was a father of 3, facing the most important challenge of his life. And for the first time in 5 years, he felt something other than emptiness. He felt purpose. The days that followed were the most difficult of Marcus Wellington's life. He had built a billion-dollar company from nothing. He had negotiated with world leaders and made decisions that affected thousands of employees. Yet none of that had prepared him for the challenge of winning the trust of 3 4-year-olds and their fiercely protective mother. Marcus moved into the main farmhouse and canceled all his business meetings for the foreseeable future. His board of directors was confused. His assistant Claire called repeatedly, demanding to know what was happening. But Marcus ignored everyone. For the first time in his adult life, something mattered more than money and success. Each morning, he would walk to the cottage and sit on the fence near the yard, watching from a distance as the children played. Amara did not invite him closer, but she did not chase him away either. It was an uneasy truce, silent and watchful. The triplets were curious about him. Grace, the little girl, was the bravest of the 3. She would wave at him sometimes when her mother was not looking. Isaiah, the older of the twin boys by 3 minutes, watched Marcus with serious eyes that seemed far too wise for a 4-year-old. Elijah, the youngest, was shy and usually hid behind his siblings. After a week of watching from afar, Marcus decided to try a different approach. He remembered that Thomas had mentioned the children loved horses. So one morning he arrived at the cottage not alone, but leading Starlight, the gentle mare, behind him. The effect was immediate. All three children ran to the fence, their eyes wide with wonder. Even Elijah forgot his shyness and pressed his small face against the wooden slats. "Mama, look!" Grace shouted. "The man brought a horse!" Amara appeared on the porch, her expression guarded. Marcus met her eyes and held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I thought maybe the children would like to see her up close," he said. "Her name is Starlight. She is very gentle." Amara hesitated. She could see the excitement on her children's faces, the pure joy that only children can feel at such simple wonders. After a long moment, she nodded slowly. "You can look," she told the triplets, "but do not touch unless the man says it is okay." "They may touch her," Marcus said quickly. "She loves children." He watched as three small hands reached through the fence to stroke Starlight's soft nose. The horse lowered her head, as if understanding that these were special visitors. Grace giggled with delight. Isaiah's serious face broke into a rare smile. Elijah whispered something to the horse that Marcus could not hear. "What is your name?" Grace asked suddenly, looking up at Marcus with those gray-green eyes that were mirrors of his own. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "My name is Marcus," he said softly. "Are you the man who owns all the horses?" "I suppose I am." Grace considered this for a moment. "Then you must be very rich. Mama says only rich people own lots of horses." Marcus could not help but smile. "Your mama is very smart." Isaiah spoke up then, his voice quiet but clear. "Why do you come here every day and watch us?" The question cut straight to the heart, as children's questions often do. Marcus glanced at Amara, who stood frozen on the porch, waiting to see how he would answer. "Because," Marcus said carefully, "you three are very special to me. I hope that someday we can be friends." Isaiah studied him for another moment, then turned his attention back to the horse. But Grace was not finished. "My mama says my daddy is far away," she announced. "Are you somebody's daddy?" Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. He blinked them away quickly. "I hope to be," he said. "Someday." Amara called the children inside then, and Marcus led Starlight back to the stable. But something had shifted between them. A door had opened, just a crack, and Marcus was determined to push through it. Over the following weeks, he found small ways to be present without being intrusive. He brought vegetables from the farm's garden to the cottage. He fixed a broken step on their porch when Amara was out running errands. He had Thomas deliver new toys to the children, pretending they were gifts from the farm. Amara noticed everything. She said nothing about the vegetables or the repaired step, but Marcus caught her looking at him differently sometimes. The hard edge of anger in her eyes had softened slightly into something more complicated. One evening, a terrible thunderstorm rolled across the farm. Lightning cracked the sky and rain pounded the earth like angry fists. Marcus sat in the main house, watching the storm through the window, when his phone rang. It was Thomas. "There is a problem at the cottage," Thomas said urgently. "The old oak tree came down in the wind. It did not hit the house, but it took out the power lines. They have no electricity." Marcus was out the door before Thomas finished speaking. He drove through the storm in his truck, barely able to see through the sheets of rain. When he reached the cottage, his heart nearly stopped. The massive oak tree lay across the driveway, its branches tangled in downed power lines that sparked dangerously in the rain. He jumped out of the truck and ran to the cottage door, pounding on it with his fist. Amara opened it almost immediately. Behind her, he could see three frightened faces, huddled together on the couch, illuminated only by candlelight. "Are you okay?" he asked, rain streaming down his face. "Is anyone hurt?" "We are fine," Amara said, but her voice shook slightly. "The children are scared. They have never seen a storm this bad." As if to emphasize her words, another crack of thunder shook the cottage. Grace screamed, and both boys began to cry. Marcus made a decision. "You cannot stay here tonight," he said. "The power lines are dangerous. Please come to the main house. You will be safe there." Amara started to protest, but another flash of lightning changed her mind. She gathered the children, wrapping them in blankets, and Marcus carried all three of them to his truck, one trip at a time. Amara climbed in last, and they drove through the storm to the big house. Inside, the main farmhouse was warm and dry. The generator kept the lights on, and a fire crackled in the large stone fireplace. Marcus showed Amara to a guest room with a big bed where all three children could sleep together. He brought them hot chocolate and extra blankets. The children were exhausted from fear and fell asleep quickly, curled together like puppies. Amara sat on the edge of the bed watching them breathe. Marcus stood in the doorway, not wanting to intrude. "Thank you," Amara said without looking at him. "You did not have to do this." "Yes, I did," Marcus replied. "They are my children." "You are—" He stopped, unsure what word to use. "Important to me," he finished finally. Amara was quiet for a long time. Then she stood and walked past him into the hallway, closing the bedroom door softly behind her. "We need to talk," she said. They went downstairs to the living room, where the fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. The storm still raged outside, but inside it felt safe and sheltered. Amara sat in an armchair, and Marcus sat across from her, giving her space. "I have been thinking," Amara began slowly, "about everything that happened, about why I never told you about the children." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "When I left you, I was so angry. You had broken every promise you ever made to me. You chose work over our marriage. You let your mother and your assistant fill your head with lies about me." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I was a fool. You were more than a fool. You were cruel. Maybe not intentionally, but the effect was the same. I spent 3 years feeling invisible, feeling like I did not matter. And when I finally had the most wonderful news to share, you could not even bother to come home." Marcus hung his head. He had no defense. Everything she said was true. "But I was wrong, too," Amara continued. Her voice cracked slightly. "I should have tried harder to tell you about the pregnancy. I should not have let my pride stop me. Our children deserved to know their father, and I took that from them because I was hurt." "You were protecting them," Marcus said. "Maybe. Or maybe I was punishing you." Amara wiped at her eyes. "Either way, they grew up without you. And that is something I will always regret." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm and the crackling fire. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Can we start over?" he asked. "Not pretend the past did not happen, but try to move forward? I want to be in their lives, Amara. I want to be their father. And I want—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "I want to see if there is still something between us, because I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." Amara looked at him then, really looked at him. The years fell away, and she saw the young man she had married, the one who had looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. That man was still there, buried under layers of regret and loneliness. "I do not know if I can trust you again," she said honestly. "You hurt me so badly, and it is not just about me anymore. If you hurt those children, if you make promises you cannot keep, I will never forgive you." "I understand," Marcus said. "I will prove myself, every day, for as long as it takes." Amara nodded slowly. "Then we take it one day at a time. You can spend time with the children, get to know them, but we keep things slow. No big announcements, no pressure. They need to learn to trust you before they learn who you really are." Marcus agreed, his heart full of hope for the first time in years. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world sparkling in the sunshine. The children woke in the big bed, confused at first. then excited to explore the main house. Marcus made pancakes for breakfast, burning the first batch but getting better as he went. The triplets thought it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. A grown man who could not cook. "Can we see the horses again?" Grace asked, syrup dripping down her chin. "If your mother says it is okay," Marcus replied. Amara watched him with her children, saw how hard he was trying, how genuine his interest was. She nodded her permission, and the morning was spent in the stables, introducing the triplets to each horse by name. "This one is Thunderbolt," Marcus explained, pointing to a large black stallion. "He is very fast but also very gentle. And this one is Butterscotch because her coat is the color of candy." Isaiah, usually so quiet, could not stop asking questions. How fast can they run? What do they eat? Can I ride one someday? Of course you can, Marcus said. When you are a little bigger, I will teach all three of you to ride. Promise? Elijah asked, speaking directly to Marcus for the first time. Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with his son. I promise, he said solemnly. The days turned into weeks, and Marcus kept his promise to take things slowly. He joined them for meals sometimes. He read bedtime stories when Amara allowed it. He learned that Grace loved to draw and bought her an easel and paints. He discovered that Isaiah was fascinated by how things worked and spent hours with him, taking apart old machinery and putting it back together. He found that Elijah had a beautiful singing voice and could remember the words to every song after hearing it just once. With each passing day, the bond grew stronger. The children began running to greet Marcus when he appeared. They started calling him Mr. Marcus, then just Marcus. They asked when he was coming and complained when he had to leave. But peace never lasts forever. One afternoon, a sleek black car appeared on the farm's driveway. Marcus was in the stable with the children when Thomas came to find him, his face worried. Your mother is here, Thomas said quietly. She says she is not leaving until she sees you. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Victoria Wellington had not visited the farm in over a decade. There was only one reason she would come now. He told the children to stay with Thomas and walk to the main house where his mother waited on the porch. She looked exactly as he remembered, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, perfectly cold. Mother, he said, what are you doing here? Victoria's eyes swept over him with disapproval. I could ask you the same thing. You have been ignoring my calls for weeks. The board is concerned. Your absence is affecting stock prices. I have more important things to deal with. More important than your company? Victoria raised an eyebrow. This is about her, is it not? That woman! I heard rumors that she was here. How did you find out? I have my sources. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. Marcus, you cannot be serious. You divorced her for a reason. She was never good enough for you, and she never will be. You know nothing about her, Marcus said, his anger rising. You never gave her a chance. Because she did not deserve one. She was a gold digger, a nobody who trapped you into marriage. She is the mother of my children. The words hung in the air. Victoria's face went pale, then red with fury. Children? What children? Triplets. They are 4 years old. They are mine, and they are perfect, and you will never speak about their mother that way again. Victoria stared at him as if he had lost his mind. This is madness. You cannot throw away everything you have built for some woman and her children. Her children are my children, and I am not throwing anything away. I am finally finding what matters. Mother and son faced each other in silence. Victoria's expression shifted from anger to something colder, more calculating. If you pursue this, she said quietly, there will be consequences. I will not stand by and watch you destroy our family's reputation. I will take action. What kind of action? Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I have lawyers, Marcus. Very good lawyers. If you insist on acknowledging these children, I will make sure the courts examine every detail of their mother's life, her past, her finances, her parenting. I will prove she is unfit, and I will take those children away from her." Marcus felt something inside him snap. For years, he had allowed his mother to influence his decisions. He had let her poison his marriage and destroy his happiness. No more. "If you go near Amara or those children," he said, his voice steady and dangerous, "I will cut you off completely. No money, no access to the company, no contact with me ever again. Do you understand?" Victoria's eyes widened. She had never seen her son like this, never heard this steel in his voice. "You would choose them over your own mother? I would choose them over anyone. They are my family. The family I should have fought for 5 years ago. I will not make that mistake again." Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back to her car. The engine started, and the black vehicle disappeared down the driveway. Marcus stood on the porch, shaking with adrenaline and emotion. He had done it. He had finally stood up to his mother. He had chosen love over obligation, family over fear. A small hand slipped into his. He looked down to find Grace standing beside him, her face concerned. "Are you sad?" she asked. Marcus knelt down and pulled his daughter into a hug. "No, sweetheart," he said. "I am actually very happy." From across the yard, Amara watched them. She had seen the confrontation, had heard Marcus defend her and their children. And for the first time since he had appeared on the farm, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. That evening, after the children were asleep, Amara found Marcus sitting alone on the porch of the main house. She sat down beside him without speaking. They looked out at the stars together, the same stars they had watched on their honeymoon so many years ago. "Thank you," Amara said finally. "For standing up to her?" "I should have done it years ago," Marcus replied. "I should have chosen you then. I am so sorry it took me this long to become the man you deserved." Amara reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had touched him willingly since he had arrived. Her fingers were warm and familiar. "We cannot change the past," she said softly. "But maybe we can build something new." Marcus turned to look at her, hope blooming in his chest. "Does that mean you are willing to try?" Amara smiled, and it was like the sun coming out after a storm. "It means I am willing to see where this goes. No promises, no rushing. But yes, Marcus, I am willing to try." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Then that is enough. For now, that is more than enough." They sat together until the moon rose high, two people who had once been everything to each other, slowly finding their way back home. 3 months had passed since Victoria Wellington's unwelcome visit to the farm. The seasons had begun to change, summer giving way to autumn, and the trees that lined the property transformed into brilliant shades of red and gold. Marcus watched from the window of the main house as Grace, Isaiah, and Elijah ran through piles of fallen leaves, their laughter echoing across the fields. Everything had changed in those 3 months, yet in many ways, everything had stayed the same. Marcus still visited the cottage every day. He still read bedtime stories and built towers out of blocks and answered endless questions about horses and trucks and why the sky was blue. But now Amara joined them for dinners at the main house. Now she smiled when she saw him coming. Now there were moments when their eyes would meet and something electric would pass between them. The children had grown comfortable with Marcus. Grace had started calling him her best friend. Isaiah had begun sharing his secret thoughts and fears. Elijah had overcome his shyness enough to ask for hugs. They loved him, even if they did not yet understand who he was. That conversation, the one Marcus and Amara both dreaded and longed for, was coming soon. They had discussed it late one night, sitting together on the porch swing, their shoulders touching. "They deserve to know," Marcus had said. "They are old enough to understand." Amara had nodded, her face troubled. "I know. I just worry about how they will react. They might feel confused or angry. They might blame me for keeping it from them. We will tell them together. We will answer all their questions. They will know that we both love them more than anything." The date was set for a Sunday afternoon, after church and a big lunch. That morning, Marcus woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep. He dressed carefully and walked outside to watch the sunrise. The farm had become his sanctuary over these past months. He had stopped checking stock prices and attending virtual board meetings. His company ran smoothly without his constant oversight, and for the first time, Marcus realized that he did not miss the chaos. He had found something more valuable than money. He had found purpose and love and family. He had found himself. The triplets arrived at the main house around noon, bouncing with energy as always. Amara followed behind them, beautiful in a simple yellow dress, her natural curls framing her face. She caught Marcus's eye and gave him a small nod. Today was the day. They ate lunch together at the big dining table, the children chattering about everything and nothing. Isaiah had found a frog near the pond and wanted to keep it as a pet. Grace had learned a new song at church and insisted on performing it for everyone. Elijah had drawn a picture of a horse that he proudly presented to Marcus. "This is Starlight," Elijah explained. "And that is you riding her, and that is Mama, and that is me and Isaiah and Grace watching." Marcus looked at the drawing, 5 stick figures standing beside a somewhat recognizable horse, his eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them away. "This is the best picture anyone has ever given me," he said. "I am going to frame it and hang it in my office." Elijah beamed with pride. After lunch, Amara suggested they all sit in the living room. The children sensed that something important was happening. They sat quietly on the big sofa, looking from their mother to Marcus with curious eyes. Amara took a deep breath. "Babies," she began, "we need to talk to you about something important. You know how you have asked me about your daddy, where he is, and why he does not live with us." 3 heads nodded in unison. "Well, the truth is, your daddy has been here all along. You have been spending time with him. You just did not know it." The children looked confused. Grace tilted her head to the side, processing the information. "You mean the nice man at the store? The one who gave us candy?" "No, sweetheart." Amara reached out and took Marcus's hand. "I mean Marcus. Marcus is your daddy." Silence fell over the room. 3 pairs of gray-green eyes turned to Marcus, wide with shock and something else, something that looked like hope. Isaiah was the first to speak. "You are our daddy? For real?" Marcus nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "For real. I am your daddy, and I have wanted to tell you for so long. I am sorry it took me so long to find you. I am sorry I missed your first steps and your first words and your first birthdays, but I am here now, and I am never leaving again." Grace burst into tears, but they were happy tears. She launched herself off the sofa and into Marcus's arms. "Daddy!" she cried. "I have a daddy!" Elijah followed his sister, climbing into Marcus's lap and wrapping his small arms around his neck. Isaiah held back for a moment, his young face serious. "Why did you not come before?" he asked quietly. "Where were you?" Marcus looked at his oldest son, seeing so much of himself in that cautious expression. "I made a lot of mistakes, buddy," he said honestly. "Before you were born, I was not a very good husband to your mama. I worked too much and did not spend enough time at home. When your mama left, I did not know about you. I did not know she was going to have babies. If I had known, I would have come right away. I promise you that." Isaiah considered this for a long moment. Then, slowly, he walked over and leaned against Marcus's side. "Okay," he said simply. "I believe you." Marcus gathered all three children in his arms, holding them close, feeling their small hearts beat against his chest. He had dreamed of this moment for months, imagined what it would feel like to have them know the truth. But the reality was even more overwhelming than he had anticipated. Amara watched them, tears streaming down her face. The family she had protected for so long, the family she had held together through poverty and struggle and loneliness, was finally complete. The weeks that followed were filled with joy and adjustment. The children called Marcus Daddy now, a word that made his heart soar every time he heard it. They asked endless questions about the years they had missed together, and Marcus answered everyone with patience and honesty. Grace wanted to know why her eyes looked like Daddy's eyes. Marcus explained that children often look like their parents, that they had gotten their beautiful eyes from him and their beautiful smiles from their mama. Isaiah wanted to know if rich people like Marcus ate different food than regular people. Marcus laughed and said that rich people ate the same food, but sometimes had other people cook it for them. Elijah wanted to know if Marcus would still love them if they were naughty. Marcus pulled his youngest son close and promised that he would love them no matter what, forever and always. But not everyone was happy about the Wellington family reunion. True to her word, Victoria had hired lawyers. Legal papers arrived at the farm demanding paternity tests and questioning Amara's fitness as a mother. Marcus fought back with his own team of attorneys, and the battle quickly turned ugly. Victoria leaked stories to the press. Headlines appeared calling Amara a gold digger who had trapped a billionaire with secret babies. Reporters showed up at the farm gates, cameras flashing, shouting questions. The children could not play outside anymore without security guards nearby. Amara tried to stay strong, but the constant attacks wore her down. She lay awake at night worrying about what would happen to her children. Marcus found her crying in the kitchen one evening, and it broke his heart. "We will get through this," he promised, holding her close. "My mother will not win. I will spend every penny I have to protect you and the children." "It is not about the money," Amara whispered. "It is about what they are saying about me. My children are going to grow up and read those articles. They are going to see what people called their mother." Marcus pulled back and looked into her eyes. "They will also see how strong their mother was. They will see how she raised them alone, worked hard to give them a good life, and never gave up. They will be proud of you, Amara. I am proud of you." The court date arrived on a gray November morning. Marcus and Amara sat side by side at the plaintiff's table, their lawyers surrounding them. Across the courtroom, Victoria sat with her team, her face as cold and composed as ever. The judge called the court to order and reviewed the case. Victoria's lawyers argued that Amara had deliberately hidden the children from their father, that she had acted out of spite and should be investigated for parental alienation. They presented photographs and witness statements trying to paint her as unstable and unfit. Then it was Marcus's turn to testify. He walked to the witness stand, his heart pounding, and swore to tell the truth. His lawyer began asking questions about his marriage, his divorce, and his relationship with his children. But it was during cross-examination that the tables turned. Victoria's lawyer made a crucial mistake. He tried to introduce letters that Victoria herself had written years ago, letters encouraging Marcus to ignore Amara's calls, letters describing Amara using racist language, letters revealing that Victoria had instructed her staff to intercept Amara's attempts to contact Marcus about the pregnancy. The courtroom fell silent as these letters were read aloud. Marcus stared at his mother in disbelief. He had suspected her interference, but seeing the proof in black and white was devastating. "Did you know about these letters?" the judge asked Victoria directly. Victoria's composure finally cracked. She stammered and deflected, but the damage was done. The very evidence she had hoped would destroy Amara had instead exposed her own cruelty and manipulation. The judge called a recess to review the new evidence. When court reconvened, his decision was swift and decisive. All claims against Amara were dismissed. Victoria was ordered to pay substantial damages for harassment and defamation. A restraining order was issued, preventing her from contacting Marcus, Amara, or the children. As Victoria's lawyers led her from the courtroom, she turned to look at her son one last time. Marcus met her gaze without flinching. There was no triumph in his expression, only sadness. She had been given every opportunity to be part of their lives, and she had chosen hate instead. "Good riddance," Amara whispered as the door closed behind Victoria. Marcus shook his head. "She is still my mother. But she made her choices. Now she has to live with them." That evening, the family gathered at the farm to celebrate. Thomas and his wife joined them, along with a few close friends who had supported them through the ordeal. The children ran wild through the house, high on sugar and excitement, while the adults shared food and stories and laughter. Later, after the guests had gone and the triplets were tucked into bed, Marcus and Amara stood together on the porch. The same porch where they had shared so many conversations, so many moments of rebuilding trust and rediscovering love. "It is really over," Amara said quietly. "We are free." Marcus turned to her, his expression serious. "Not quite over. There is one more thing I need to do." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Amara's breath caught in her throat. "Amara Johnson," Marcus said, dropping to one knee, "5 years ago, I let you walk away. I was too proud and too stupid to fight for us. I will regret that for the rest of my life. But I am fighting now. I am all in. I want to spend every day proving to you that I have changed, that I can be the husband you deserve and the father our children need." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a single diamond, not ostentatious or flashy, but elegant and meaningful. "This was my grandmother's ring," Marcus continued, "the one person in my family who would have loved you from the start. She passed away before I could introduce you, but I know she would have been proud to see you wearing this. Will you marry me, Amara? Will you give me a second chance to be your husband?" Amara looked at the ring, then at the man kneeling before her. The man who had broken her heart and then spent months carefully putting it back together. The man who had fought his own mother to protect her and their children. The man who had given up his empire to be a father. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to his feet, pulling her into his arms. They kissed under the starlight, a kiss that tasted like forgiveness and hope and forever. From an upstairs window, 3 small faces watched with barely contained excitement. Grace bounced on her toes. "Mama and Daddy are kissing!" she squealed. "Does that mean we are going to be a real family?" "We already are a real family," Isaiah said wisely. "But now Daddy will live with us all the time. Can we go tell them we were watching?" Elijah asked. His siblings grinned, and moments later, 3 children burst through the front door and launched themselves at their parents, nearly knocking them over. "You are getting married!" Grace shouted. "We saw everything!" Marcus laughed and scooped all 3 children into his arms. "You were supposed to be asleep." "We were too excited," Isaiah admitted. "Is it true? Are you going to stay forever?" Marcus looked at Amara, then at his children. "Forever and ever," he promised. The wedding took place on Christmas Eve, right there on the farm. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the property in white. The barn was decorated with evergreen branches and twinkling lights. The horses wore red ribbons, and the entire staff of the farm attended as guests. The triplets served as flower girl and ring bearers. Grace walked down the aisle, scattering rose petals with great seriousness. Isaiah carried the rings on a velvet pillow, his face determined. Elijah held his mother's hand as she made her way toward Marcus, who waited at the altar with tears streaming down his face. Amara wore a simple white dress, her hair adorned with baby's breath. She had never looked more beautiful to Marcus. As she approached, he thought about all the roads that had led them here, all the pain and regret and finally redemption. The ceremony was short and sweet. They wrote their own vows. Amara promised to be patient and to communicate, even when it was hard. Marcus promised to be present, to choose his family every single day, to never let anything come between them again. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the children cheered louder than anyone. Marcus kissed his bride, then picked up all 3 children so the newly official family could have their first group hug. As the reception began and music filled the barn, Marcus stepped outside for a moment of quiet. He looked up at the stars, thinking about the strange journey that had brought him here. A year ago, he had been a lonely billionaire, empty and searching for meaning. Now he had everything he had ever wanted. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus turned to find Amara beside him, snowflakes catching in her hair. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," he said. "I did not deserve a second chance, but you gave me one anyway. I will never understand why." Amara smiled and took his hand. "Because you changed, Marcus. You saw what mattered, and you fought for it. That is all anyone can ask for." They stood together in the snow, watching their children through the barn window as they danced and laughed with the guests. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "I used to think success was about money and power. I thought happiness came from having more than everyone else. But standing here with you, watching our children, I realize I had it all wrong. What is success, then?" Marcus looked at his wife. The love of his life, the mother of his children. "This," he said simply, "this is success. Being present, being loved, being home." Amara leaned her head against his shoulder. "Welcome home, then, Marcus Wellington." From inside the barn, Grace noticed her parents outside. She ran to the door and shouted through the cold night air, "Mama! Daddy! Come dance with us!" Marcus and Amara exchanged a smile. Then, hand in hand, they went back inside to dance with their family, leaving footprints in the fresh snow that would soon be covered but never forgotten. The years that followed were not always easy. There were arguments and challenges and moments of doubt. Raising 3 spirited children was exhausting. Building a marriage on the foundation of past pain required constant work. But Marcus and Amara faced every obstacle together. He eventually returned to running his company, but with strict boundaries. He was home for dinner every night. He never missed a birthday or a school play or a bedtime story. Amara returned to nursing, working part-time at a local clinic, using her skills to help the community that had embraced them. The triplets grew into remarkable young people. Grace became an artist, her work eventually displayed in galleries across the country. Isaiah studied engineering and invented devices to help people with disabilities. Elijah became a music teacher, sharing his beautiful voice with the next generation. Victoria Wellington never reconciled with her son. She passed away alone in her Manhattan penthouse years later, her fortune divided among charities because she had no one left to leave it to. Marcus paid for her funeral and wept for the relationship they could have had if pride and prejudice had not stood in the way. But that sadness was a small shadow in a life filled with light. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Marcus and Amara sat on the same porch swing where they had decided to try again. Their grandchildren played in the yard below, chasing chickens and picking wildflowers. "Do you ever regret it?" Amara asked. "Giving up the jet-set life for all this?" Marcus watched his grandchildren, listened to their laughter, felt the warmth of his wife beside him. "Not for a second," he said. "Do you ever regret giving me a second chance?" Amara pretended to think about it. "Well, you still burn pancakes." Marcus laughed and pulled her close. "Some things never change." "No," Amara agreed, kissing his cheek. "But some things do." and that makes all the difference. The sun set over Wellington Farm, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Two people who had once been lost found their way back to each other. Two hearts that had been broken learned to beat as one. And three children who had grown up without a father discovered that family is not about blood or timing or perfection. Family is about showing up. Family is about choosing love, even when it is hard. Family is about second chances and new beginnings and the courage to try again. Marcus Wellington had built an empire, but his greatest achievement was much simpler than that. His greatest achievement was learning that the only wealth that matters is the wealth of the heart, and that home is not a place but a feeling, the feeling of being exactly where you belong.